Hello and welcome to this learning module. In today's session, we will discuss the pathophysiology of shock. This video is intended to supplement any readings or coursework assigned by your instructor. Pathophysiology is the study of how normal physiologic processes are affected by disease. For example, the pathophysiology of diabetes is related to insulin levels within the body and the body's ability to use this insulin to manage blood glucose or sugar levels. In the anatomy and physiology portion of the course, we've determined that groups of specialized cells that work together for a similar purpose form tissue. Tissue that have similar functions comprise organs. Multiple organs that work together for the same purpose make up an organ system. As we also learned in the anatomy chapter, all of the organ systems are vitally important to keeping us, the organism, alive, healthy, and well. At the cellular level, oxygen and glucose are necessary for normal cell metabolism and function. Equally as important is the removal of cellular waste products. Think about what would happen if your community's garbage collectors went on strike. Garbage would pile up in front of homes and on the street, which would lead to significant community health problems. The same thing will happen in our cells. The buildup of waste product in our body cells significantly impacts the health and function of those cells. Our body goes through a considerable amount of energy, or ATP, to maintain a state of equilibrium, also known as homeostasis. Things like body temperature, acid-base balance, or pH, and oxygen levels all need to be within a narrow range for the body to function normally. Injury and illness can disrupt the delivery of oxygen and glucose, as well as the removal of waste products. Cellular metabolism, also known as cellular respiration, is the process where the body's cells break down molecules of glucose to produce energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. There are two types of cellular metabolism, aerobic and anaerobic. Aerobic metabolism occurs in the presence of oxygen. Aerobic metabolism is an effective process that yields 36 units of ATP energy for each glucose molecule. Anaerobic metabolism happens when there is a lack of oxygen. Anaerobic metabolism is an ineffective process that only yields 2 ATP energy units and also produces a considerable amount of a dangerous waste product called lactic acid. As lactic acid and other wastes accumulate around the cells, the area becomes toxic and cells will begin to die. Aerobic metabolism is a more efficient process, but it requires adequate oxygen in the environment, an open, clear airway, proper ventilation or movement of air in and out of the body, and an appropriate ratio of oxygen in the alveoli to perfusion in the pulmonary capillaries, which we also call the ventilation-perfusion ratio. Much of the ATP created during aerobic metabolism is used by the sodium-potassium pump in the cell. Sodium, whose chemical abbreviation is Na, is primarily found outside the cell, while potassium, whose chemical abbreviation is K, is found primarily inside the cell. Without a functioning sodium-potassium pump, sodium that finds its way into the cell cannot exit and accumulates inside the cell. This causes fluid to shift into the cell, which interferes with normal cell function and can ultimately lead to cell death. ATP is required to pump sodium molecules out of the cell against the concentration gradient. Potassium then moves with the gradient into the cell. As you can see from the graphic on the screen, sodium and potassium are exchanged in a continuous cycle that is necessary for proper cellular function. The cycle continues as long as the cells produce energy through aerobic metabolism. When insufficient ATP is produced through anaerobic metabolism, the sodium-potassium pump will fail and cells will die. The lactic acid, the byproduct of anaerobic metabolism, when this accumulates in the cell, it disrupts the functions of the cell, leading to cell damage or death. As the lactic acid accumulates, it produces an acidic environment that will disturb cellular function and stability. High acid levels inactivate enzyme function, disrupt cellular membranes, and ultimately lead to cell death. In addition, the cell has little energy to perform its normal functions. The normal pH range of the human body is 7.35 to 7.45, which is an extremely narrow window. Buildup of lactic acid in our cells will disrupt the necessary acid-base balance, causing metabolic acidosis. As we already discussed, our body expends ATP to maintain homeostasis, that fancy word for balance or equilibrium. Even slight disruptions in the acid-base balance can have detrimental effects on our bodies. Perfusion refers to the process by which oxygenated blood is delivered throughout the circulatory system to the body's tissues and organs, allowing for the exchange of oxygen, nutrients, and waste products at the cellular level. Effective perfusion depends on the adequate cardiac output, sufficient blood volume, and intact vascular tone to ensure that blood reaches capillary beds throughout the body. When perfusion is optimal, tissues receive the oxygen and nutrients needed for normal metabolism and function. However, when perfusion is compromised, cells become deprived of oxygen, leading to anaerobic metabolism, acidosis, and potential organ dysfunction. Maintaining proper perfusion is therefore critical to sustaining life and preventing irreversible cellular injury. The perfusion triangle is a model for understanding how the body maintains adequate perfusion, and it includes the heart, which is the pump, the blood vessels, which comprise the container, and the blood, which is the fluid that fills the container. Every minute of every day, our heart pumps our body's estimated 5 liters of blood throughout the approximately 60,000 miles of blood vessels in our body. If one or more of these components of the perfusion triangle fails, a state of hypoperfusion or shock can happen. So let's review these 3 important components. The heart has 4 chambers. The top chambers are called the atria, and the bottom chambers the ventricles. When the atria contract, they fill the ventricles. When the ventricles contract, they pump blood out of the heart. The right ventricle pumps deoxygenated blood to the lungs, while the left ventricle pumps oxygenated blood to the body. Deoxygenated blood from the upper part of the body is returned via the superior vena cava, and deoxygenated blood from the lower part of the body is returned through the inferior vena cava. The vena cavae return the deoxygenated blood to the right atrium. When the right atrium contracts, blood is pumped through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, blood is pumped through the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary artery, which carries the deoxygenated blood to the lungs. Waste products are removed, and oxygen is replaced in the blood at the pulmonary capillary level. From the lungs, the freshly oxygenated blood flows through the pulmonary vein into the left atrium of the heart. As the left atrium contracts, the blood flows through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle. The left ventricle is the strongest ventricle on the heart because when it contracts, it sends blood through the aortic valve into the aorta and out to all parts of the body. The image on the right differentiates the pulmonary circuit from the systemic circuit. The pulmonary circuit includes the pulmonary artery, lungs, pulmonary capillaries, and pulmonary vein. The systemic circuit includes the aorta, arteries of the body, capillaries, veins, and the superior and inferior cavae. If the heart fails, fluid will not circulate to the pulmonary circuit or the systemic circuit, which will lead to a state of hypoperfusion. One of the determinants of adequate blood pressure and perfusion is blood volume. An adult has approximately 70 milliliters of blood for every kilogram, or 2.2 pounds of body weight. Thus, a patient who weighs 154 pounds or 70 kilograms would have approximately 4,900 milliliters or 4.9 liters of blood. Blood volume correlates with body mass, therefore a larger patient would normally have a greater blood volume. So it stands to reason that the loss of 1 liter of blood in a 100-pound patient would be much more significant than a patient weighing 200 pounds. Blood is comprised of formed elements and plasma. The formed elements, which are cells, make up approximately 45% of the blood composition. Plasma is the fluid component that accounts for the remaining 55%. Plasma is primarily composed of water. The formed elements in the blood are the red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Red blood cells carry oxygen and deliver it to cells for metabolism. The white blood cells protect the body against infection and eliminate dead and injured cells and other debris. Platelets play a major role in blood clotting and the control of bleeding. The image on the right shows the location of major arteries and veins in the human body. In this image, the arteries that carry blood away from the heart are shown in red, while the veins that return blood to the heart are shown in blue. Capillaries connect the arterial system to the venous system, and this is where gas exchange takes place in the body. Systemic vascular resistance, or SVR, is the resistance to blood flow through a vessel. As a blood vessel constricts or vasoconstricts, resistance inside the cell increases, which increases the pressure inside the vessel. Conversely, as a vessel dilates or vasodilates, resistance inside the vessel decreases, which drops the pressure inside the vessel. As we see in the image on the left, blood vessels can constrict and dilate as needed to maintain an adequate blood pressure in the body. The top number in the blood pressure is the systolic, and that corresponds to the pressure in the arteries as the left ventricle contracts. The bottom number of the blood pressure is called the diastolic, which corresponds to the pressure in the arteries as the ventricles relax and fill with blood for the next contraction. To ensure adequate perfusion, our vascular system must be the correct size to ensure that blood can flow to all parts of the body in adequate amounts. In instances where there is widespread vasodilation, the blood pressure will drop and the blood will not pump to the entire body. Blood is distributed through the cardiovascular system, but not evenly. Most of the blood is housed within the venous system, which is considered a reservoir system. The venous system can enlarge or reduce its capacity in response to increases or decreases in the blood volume. The venous system is responsible for supplying the right side of the heart with an adequate volume of blood. If the volume entering the right side of the heart is decreased, the amount ejected from the left ventricle will also be reduced. Therefore, the venous volume plays a major role in maintaining blood pressure and adequate perfusion of the cells. For normal metabolism to occur, oxygen must be continuously delivered by the blood to the cells. Carbon dioxide, a byproduct of aerobic metabolism, must be carried back to the lungs to be blown off during exhalation. A disturbance in this transport system can lead to both cellular hypoxia, or a lack of oxygen available to the cells, and to hypercarbia, or a buildup of carbon dioxide in the blood. Both hypoxia and hypercarbia pose problems for normal cellular function and stability. Baroreceptors are stretch-sensitive pressure receptors located in the aorta that carries oxygenated blood from the left ventricle to the body, and also in the carotid sinuses that are located in the neck. These baroreceptors detect changes in blood pressure. As the pressure inside the vessels change, it decreases or increases the stretch of the fibers of the baroreceptors. The baroreceptors, having detected the change in blood pressure, send impulses to the cardiac regulatory center of the brainstem to make compensatory alterations in the blood pressure. This is depicted in the image on your right. Microcirculation is the flow of blood through the smallest blood vessels, the arterioles, which are the smaller versions of arteries, venules, which are smaller versions of veins, and capillaries. The capillaries are where the exchange of nutrients, oxygen, carbon dioxide, glucose, waste products, and metabolic substances happen between the blood and the cells. The small sphincters seen in the left image on the arterial side of the capillary beds control the flow of blood through the capillaries. If the precapillary sphincter is relaxed, blood moves through the capillary. If the precapillary sphincter is constricted or contracted, the blood is shunted away from the capillary. The precapillary sphincters help to maintain arterial pressure and control the movement of blood throughout the capillary beds. Shock is a life-threatening condition that occurs when the circulatory system fails to deliver adequate oxygen and nutrients to meet the metabolic demands of the body's tissue. This results in cellular hypoxia, which leads to a shift from aerobic to anaerobic metabolism. As we discussed, anaerobic metabolism produces less ATP and generates lactic acid, leading to metabolic acidosis. As the cells become energy deprived, the sodium-potassium pump fails, allowing sodium and water to enter the cells, causing cellular swelling and dysfunction. If uncorrected, this cellular injury progresses to tissue and organ failure. The body initially compensates for shock through mechanisms such as increased heart rate, increased ventilatory rate, and vasoconstriction. However, as shock progresses, these compensatory mechanisms become overwhelmed. Widespread vasodilation, increased capillary permeability, and tiny clots in blood vessels further impair oxygen delivery and waste removal. The result is a downward spiral of worsening tissue hypoxia, inflammation, and multiple organ dysfunction. Without timely recognition and intervention, shock can rapidly progress to irreversible organ failure and death. A key take-home point for all EMS providers is by the time we see signs and symptoms of shock in our patient, their body has already been in a state of hypoperfusion at the cellular level for an extended period of time. When treating a patient, we need to realize that every intervention we provide must be focused on keeping that patient alive at the cellular level and ensuring aerobic metabolism. Remember, as I said at the beginning of this video, as cells die, tissue will begin to die. As tissue dies, organs are in jeopardy of failing. As the organs in our body died, organ system failure will lead to patient death. This brings us to the end of this learning video. For more detailed information on shock, please refer to the corresponding chapter in your EMT textbook. Thank you for watching this video.